All right. So here we are on our next chapter. We're going to talk about infrastructure security. What is infrastructure security? This is how you're going to secure and create one, architecture, and then two, secure mindset, and be clear about how you're going to adhere to best practices when it comes to securing your resources in your cloud environment. So with AWS, it's going to revolve around a lot of different protocols. We'll go over a lot of them in this lesson. But first, we're going to start with a Bastion host, right? Bastion host is a common practice. Lets you securely access EC2s in private subnets, right? So a Bastion host is a specially configured EC2 instance that acts as a gateway between your local machine and private instances within your VPC. It enables secure and controlled access to instances that are not directly available from the public internet. So this subject and setup is crucial for maintaining the security posture of your AWS environment. So we'll give you an article here that you'll see in the description. Okay. And we'll make sure that you're able to see this. Okay. So one thing you're going to do is you're going to generate a key pair for your host and your EC2. All right. So how are we going to do this? Let's go to EC2. Um, let's launch our instance that we loaded in a previous lesson. Let's start that up. Okay, so let's go find key pairs. Click create key pair, and then call it security training. All right, we'll select .pem, and we'll download this. All right, so I've got a number of key pairs. Okay, so let's go back and see if our instance that we started is now launched. Okay, so it's up and running, or it's initializing. Let's see. We might have to start a new instance just in case. But for right now, let's see if we can get in here, make a couple edits. Okay, actions, change security groups, my images, monitor troubleshoot, no. Well, let's actually go forward creating one. Okay, so let's just create an instance. All right, so we'll do like we did yesterday. Key pair instance. I'm just doing this so it can be obvious why we're using it. So we're going to use the free AMI. Okay, the T2 micro instance, we're going to use that. Okay, and then we're going to select for the key pair, and we just created. And then we're going to select the default group. And what else do I need? Got the VPC. Is that the default VPC? Yeah, it's on the default. We'll just keep that there. No subnets. So we got, okay, so we got our subnets set up. Okay. Okay. We'll go ahead and launch it. The storage can remain the same. Okay. So we're going to go over to our VPC. Actually, I'm trying to think if I should keep it on there. Let's see what we can do here. Instance state. Change source destination. Modify instance, edit user data. No, this looks... All right, let's try this. What? right, so let's go to our VPC. Oh, wow, I don't have any subnets. No wonder. Oh, wow. Okay, that might be why I didn't have. Okay, let's go to the VPC settings. Oh, wow. Oh, man. All right, let's try a new VPC. Let's delete that one. All right, let's create a VPC. VPC and more. Um, security project key pair. All right, we're just gonna go with the standard. Only 4,000 IPs, no IPv5, two availability zones, public subnets. Yeah, that's fine. Private subnets, that's fine. NAT gateways, we shouldn't need that. S3 gateways, that'll be okay. Let me see any tags. Okay. Okay, we're on VPC. So we got our virtual private cloud here. Okay, so let's see. Where's our public subnet? Okay, we have our route tables. Enabled. DHCP is set. Public IP. Okay. Let's create a security group that we can work for this. Okay. We'll call this Bastion Security Group. Okay. We'll set this for this one. Add a rule. We'll do SH port. Port should be okay. Okay. This is my IP. So this should be good for me to access it. Okay. And then let's go back to here. Instances. All right. So we're going to use this key pair instance public. We're going to make a public and a private instance. Because I think, do we already have one that's launched? Just want to make sure. Okay, okay. Public, and then mid. Instance, private. Okay, so what we're gonna do with this, we're gonna go for the public. We're gonna have this is good with the AWS. We have the instance AMI. We're gonna select the correct key pair, security training. We're gonna edit the network to go here. Okay, we're gonna select the private. And then auto assign IP. Let's see. That's good for the private. Okay, the security group. No, let's choose one that we just created. So the Bastion Hosts. Okay, so that should be good. Okay, so we should have on the VPC we created. Okay, let's see this. With the right AMI, this is going to be free. The instance type will be free. It's very lightweight. The right key pair that we created on the VPC we created on the private subnet with the Bastion security group. All right, so this private subnet should be allowed. And now, before we click launch, we'll go over to the, whoa, 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 whoa. Wait, I think I might have done this a little backwards. Wait, let me think this through. Okay, the VPC, I need to choose a public subnet because it says public. That's right. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's go for the public. Let's do the public one. Okay, so this is subnet public two, so the public one. Okay, public, auto assign. So if it's public, we're going to auto assign a public IP. We're going to have we'll have an inbound rule for my IP. And then, yeah, this should be good. Oh my goodness. All right, now let's get the private subnet. Wow, you have to pay attention to your rules, okay? Okay, so we have the same thing, AMI, the instance, okay. The key pair, we'll get the VPC. All right, we'll go for the private one, disabled IP, for the security group, Bastion. Okay, and then I'll have to update this to add SSH. That's what I'll have to do. Okay, no, that's okay. Okay, so let's launch this. Let's launch this. All right. So that green means it's good. Green means it's good. Okay, let's go back to the security groups. Okay, and then we'll edit the inbound rules. We'll add one for SSH. Okay, SSH anywhere. Huh. SSH for port 22. Yeah. Okay, so we'll save the rules. We'll be okay. Okay. So we'll try to SSH into this, which I've tried the other day. Did not have any much success. All right, so let me go back to the instance. Go back to this instance. All right, so we're going to SSH with this. So SSH-I, and the name of this will be security training.pem. And then what are we going to use for the user? Okay, this is the public instance, and so we need the public DNS. Okay. Okay, so I'll try and SSH in. Okay. Sure, you want to continue connect? Yes. Permanently added to list. Permission denied. Huh. Now where? That's interesting. Oh wow. So I'm trying to get logged into this. See the Oh man, I'm trying to get into this. All right, so let's see if I can follow the instructions in this article here, because this will give you some insight as to what this is supposed to let me do. All right, let me this down to a reasonable size. So what I'm supposed to be able to do is get into this. So I created my VPC, created the subnets with the private and public. I have the route table set up. That was automatically associated with it. So the instances are launched. I have the key pair. First method using a Bastion host. Do I need an internet gateway or do I not have one? Okay, let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I do have an internet gateway. Hmm. So I should be able to attach it. All right. We're not going to beat up too much time, but basically, this is supposed to you're supposed to have the key pair and the public IP and be able to SSH to this through the command line with the following code. All right. SSH, the name of the key, and then the public IP address. Okay. So my apologies for it not working as intended, but I've been a little rusty trying to do this. I don't do it all the time. I usually use SSM. Um, so the point of the security groups is that you're supposed to be able to allow you to SSH to port 22 using your IP, right? And you can allow outbound traffic, so that will allow all traffic going outward. So if you need to connect to the public internet, there would be a way to do that. So the configuration would ensure that only the Bastion host can access the private instance and only your IP can access the Bastion host. So it would allow a safe pathway for communication. So how's this relevant, right? So understanding what the Bastion host is and how it's pertinent to the exam and use of securing network infrastructure allows you to implement access control, which means implementing the Bastion host lets you manage and restrict access to private resources. Security groups. These are incredibly important. So if you can configure these, you can enforce strict access policies. Like I showed the port number, the IP address, and audit and monitoring. So you can ensure that access through Bastion hosts is logged and monitored for compliance and auditing. You can do that directly on the VPC. See these VPC flow logs? You can create those there. But mastering this will really help you. Okay, let's go into site-to-site VPN setup. So the site-to-site VPN setup, we're going to talk a little more around this. We'll try and get it done though. So this will be interesting. I might have to do. Okay. All right. This enables secure connectivity between your AWS VPC and your on-prem data center or office network. So this is critical for hybrid architectures and falls under domain 1 and 2 in the AWS Security Specialty Exam. So it will be incident response and logging and monitoring. So your goal should be to establish an encrypted IPsec VPN tunnel from your on-prem net environment to AWS via a customer gateway. So your on-premises router or firewall, the virtual private gateway or VGW. This is the AWS endpoint attached to your VPC and a VPN connection. So this will be an encrypted tunnel over the public internet. So how would you do this? So one, you want to create a customer gateway. So we're in the VPC console. We'll click, let me close out some of this. All right, clearing out some of this. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your patience. All right. Okay, so we're on VPC. Let's create a customer gateway. Let's call it on-prem router. All right. So for BGP ASN, use a 2-byte ASN. So unless you have something different, 6500 is a good one. Your IP address, so this would be the public IP of your on-prem device or your NAT IP if it's behind a NAT T, okay? And optionally, you can use a certificate ARN. if you're using a private certificate authority, okay? So we have one here that I've had. Do I have a private certificate? That's interesting. Uh, okay. And you can do a customer gateway device, but that's optional for very specific ways, right? So you click create and then go forward, all right? So for the exam, know the difference between using public versus NAT translated IPs. That's going to be very important, okay? And if you want, we can look up let's look this up via Google so you can see it for yourself. Okay. All right. So this shows you public IP address when using that, which is directly assigned to a device, allows for direct communication with the internet. A NAT translated IP uses a public IP address provided by the NAT, the network address translator, right? So this translated to private IP on the device within a local network to a public IP for internet access. So it hides the private IP address and the network's IP addresses from the public internet. So this is a way to have security baked in. All right. So let's go back. So if you had that customer gateway, then you create a virtual private gateway. All right, right here. So you go to the virtual private gateway, create this. Let's name it my VPN GW. You choose a default ASN, or you can use a custom, right? So the default, I believe, is 64512. You can do a custom one. There he goes. And then let's say 6501. All right. You hit your key pairs, you click create. Please note, you cannot change the ASN after you create this. All right. Then at this point, when you go to your VPC, and then I'm walking through, I'm not going to actually do this for this. So you go to your VPC, and you go to your route tables. Oh, well, let me go over here to route tables. Okay. You can select the route tables for your subnet. Okay. Okay. Go to route propagation, edit this, and then from here, you'd select the VGW, right? That virtual private gateway, and then save it. All right. If you don't use propagation, you'd have to manually add a static route pointing to VGW for the destination CIDR or for the on-prem network, right? So the VPN won't work unless the route propagation or manual routes are in place, okay? And then at that point, you go to the VPC, security groups. Security groups are crucial. And you can select a VPC you can select the security group that's attached to your EC2, and then you can adjust this, right? So I have a couple of these. So let's just give you, I don't want to mess with the default. So you would want to go to the default, right? And then from here, you go for your inbound rules, edit this, and you can add inbound rules, all right? One that you would want, see, ICMP. This would be for ping. Let me see, does it specify it again? No, it doesn't. Okay. All right, so custom, you'll have it anywhere. Yeah, let's just say my IP. And then you want one for, let's see, RDP. That'll be port 3389. Let's change that to my IP. And then you add source. Oh, well, actually, the RDP, technically, this would be the on-prem CIDR block, right? So it wouldn't technically be mine. So you could have these go forward, okay? And then save the rules. And you should be able to be good to go to create the VPC connection, right? So you have all this configured here. You go to the site-to-site VPN, create the VPN connection, enter your name, site VPN. That's just a name. Then you pick your target, your virtual gateway that you created from earlier. Then your customer gateway that you created from earlier, right? And then you'd have your routing options. Okay. So from here, you could choose dynamic or static, right? For static, you would enter your on-prem IP address. That's that CIDR block. For dynamic, then you'd have to worry about then you'd have to get BGP, which is a border gateway protocol, which is a dynamic way so that if something shifts, it can shift with it. All right. So you would typically for this go with a static IP, and then you could do. I'm just going to set that there. That's not what your IP is going to be. You need to know your IP. Okay. And then optionally, you can go for some other pieces, right? Secret storage, your local IPs, right? These are optional. And then you can do your tunnel options, your secrets manager, right, which you just passed over. All right, so you can do a way to customize inside the CIDR for shared keys. This allows more encryption and unspecified tunnels, okay? And then you create the connection, and this should link up. All right, so then once the VPN is available, you go over to VPN, and then you'd see the connection here, and you'd be able to click and download the configuration to save that. And so from there, you'd be able to get the vendor, the platform, software version. And so this file would be used to configure your gateway device, say Cisco, Juniper, anything along those levels, right? And then on that, you have to do that with your on-prem, okay? Which we don't have that scenario here because we're just in my home office. So for the exam, remember this, the VPN setup. Understand that there's hybrid networking patterns and secure connectivity methods that need to be taking place here, right? You're working from a static IP, you're working with a dynamic cloud, sometimes with a static IP. Then there's also encryption in transit. So the VPN encrypts the traffic using IP security, right? Which we talked about with the security groups and the Bastion hosts, and how this aligns with data in transit protection, right? Well, the Bastion host doesn't quite do that, but it does add authentication. Then there's BGP versus static routing. We talked on that a little bit. And this is useful for resilient routing and redundancy. So for something like Cloud Hub or multi VPN. And then look at ICMP. So ICMP allows for ping and in security groups. These are a part of the incident response scenarios. So you can check for connectivity, you can do troubleshooting, you can make sure only specific places are allowed in, people or places are allowed in. And you have route propagation, which is tested as a cause of connectivity issues. So how do you get those routes to actually work and move forward within the VPC and over to the network and through your VPN? And you can talk about Cloud Hub. So this will be kind of a scenario-based question. So this will talk about how do you have multi-site secure communications. It's a lot, but I hope you get the broader details and understand that how this gets configured allows you to have connections between your on-prem to your cloud environment. So let's go into client VPN. So setting up a client VPN using the GUI enables secure remote access to AWS resources in private subnets and integrates with on-prem networks via VPN or direct connect. So what we'll do with this is deal with a few domains: incident response, so secure client connectivity; logging and monitoring, so VPN connection logs; and then infrastructure security. So that means access control via network rules and IAM integration. So what is client VPN? This is a managed client-based VPN that uses OpenVPN protocol to establish secure TLS connections from your device to your AWS VPC. So here's some components of this. This will be the client VPN endpoint, which is an AWS managed service where clients connect. There's a target network subnet. This is a VPC subnet used to route VPN traffic. There's the authorization rules. So you can define who can access what inside the VPC. The route table, VPN, this is where to send client traffic. There's the authentication type. Is this Active Directory? Is it going to be mutual through certificates or IAM Identity Center with SAML, which is Security Assertion Markup Language. Then you have your VPN client. This will be on AWS or OpenVPN desktop client to connect. So this is going to be more complex. So I'm going to give you a general walkthrough for this, okay? So one, you're going to generate your certificates for mutual authorization only, right? So you're going to create a server and a client certificate using OpenVPN tools. So let's go to AWS Certificate Manager. Private. Oh, they changed it. There we go. Okay. So from here, what you would go is import a cert, right? Here you would get your server cert and your private key, right? Right here. And then do the same for each user client certificate. Now, if you're using Active Directory or IAM Identity Center, you can skip this step. You don't need to do it, okay? But this is just where you would go to do this. So then you would create a client VPN endpoint. So we're in the VPN section. We're in the client endpoint section, right? Oh, no, we aren't. I thought we were. Client VPN endpoint. So we create a client VPN endpoint. So we'll just call it my client VPN. All right, just very descriptive. All right, so we can create, a description, but I'll just copy and paste this. For security practice. Okay, so you enter your client IPv4, right? So this was the range that AWS will assign to clients. So let's say 10.200.0.0/16. Okay. What let's do for that's a lot of IPs. So then your certificate arm. So if you're using a certificate arm from ACM, this is where you choose that. Okay. Then you can select authentication, use mutual, or user-based, right? So this will be your certificate arm, or you start to go for directories. You're talking about Active Directory. So this will require directory service setup. And then you have your mutual auth, right? So federated, this will be the SAML that we were talking about earlier. You select here. We don't have any SAML providers, but this is where you configure it. Okay, and then enable connection logging. So this would be good for monitoring and logging what's going on. And you select your CloudWatch log groups, which we created in a previous, but we don't have that here. And then you could select this from the streams, and then you can create it. So everything else is optional, which you see here, right? But then you can go a little more specific for DNS1, DNS2, transfer protocol. TCP would be ideal. Split tunnels, that would be for redundancy and availability. And then your VPC ID, you can select that, ports, session timeouts. But this is the basic needs you would have for this, right? So this is how you create it. Let's see. Yeah, I knew it. I knew I wasn't going to create. Let's try and set up all this stuff. I am not going to select that. I don't think I have any of that. Let me see. Yeah, that's what I said. Like, I don't think I have any of that. So I don't need that. User base. Yeah. So this is my basic setup. So I can set it up here, and then I select the security group if I wanted to, but it's basic. It's really basic. So let's create that just to show you. All right. So then you have to associate a target network. Okay. So how would I do that? Okay. So in your client VPN console, it's not loading, is it? Oh, there's an error. All right, whatever. I don't know what there would be. That's interesting. Let's just use that. Let's see if that default does it. Certificate chain is empty. Huh. That's interesting. All right. So let's move forward. So let's say within this, you would go into your VPN, which is this, and then choose a subnet from the VPC. Oh, maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. Well, no, that was. All right. Let's see. Yeah, the certificate chain is. Yeah, that's a problem. This is going to be an issue. Okay, that's okay. All right. So you would choose a public subnet, a subnet for your, well, you choose a subnet for your VPC, and you choose one subnet per availability zone for high availability, and then you make it associate, right? With that, then you can go to authorization rules, right? And then from there, you could choose your destination CIDR. So that would be where this is going towards. Let's say the 10.0.0.0/16, and then grant access to an IAM group, an Active Directory group, or all users, right? And you click add. And this will define who can access what inside the VPC once they're connected. Okay, so this starts to get that authentication and access. All right, and then you add routes to the client VPN. Wish I could show you this. Okay, wish I could. And at this point, you add the routes. So you go to the route table and then add a route, right? And so you'd add the CIDRs that the client needs to reach. So that would be your VPC's range. Okay, which means, oh, is it 10.0.0.20? I think is what I had set up. Yeah, 10.0. So that would be added there for the route tables. Okay, and then you'd target that to your VPC subnet association. And at that point, over here, you could download the configuration file, right? And this would be a VPN, .vpn or .ovpn. This would be the file you would use in the VPN client to establish the tunnel. And then from there, you would get that to install the AWS VPN client or an OPN VPN compatible client and import this configuration file, right? I wish I could, the one next to the create client, right? And then there you'd set up for mutual auth, you need to import the client certificates. For Active Directory, you need to log in with your username password. For IAM Identity Center, you'd be redirected to the SAML login URL, okay? And then within this, with the connection logging, right? And you have the log group and the log streams. Then you'd be able to log anything, including client connection attempts, any errors, any disconnects. And so this would be useful for forensics and to troubleshoot connectivity issues. All right. So for the exam, you should know the OpenVPN protocol. So understand what TLS-based remote access encryption is. It means encrypted access. Okay. Then your cyber blocks. So what are the client assignments? Like how do IPs get assigned? Basically, you don't want IPs addresses to be the same. You want them to have enough IPs, and then you want the VPC routing to be configured correctly, right? Then authentication. So you're talking about, is this going to be for Active Directory with username? Is it going to be mutual with certificates? Is it going to be IAM Identity Service, Identity Center with single sign-on? So you need to know the use cases and the trade-offs of each, okay? And then you're required to grant VPC access. So this will be part of the exam. This is part of why you have the certificates for trust. And you have your CloudWatch logging. This is required for connection audits, monitoring. This is very useful. And then it might be included, but elastic IPs. So if the subnet is public or if a client needs a public IP. Okay, so AWS Client is a secure way to allow remote users to access to AWS and on-prem resources. Okay, it's very useful for that hybrid cloud scenario. So next we're going to go to VPC peering. So that will be, where is this? Why am I not peering connections? There we go. Okay, so peering is part of validating and troubleshooting to get people a secure private connection between two VPCs so that resources can communicate using private IPs without traversing the internet. Okay, so the portion of this is, it's analogous to how you would go from a cloud to an on-prem network, in that you have some similarity, a lot of similarities actually. So one of the first ones, you have to make sure that the VPC CIDR blocks do not overlap. Okay, so that means if you have, I'm going to go down to the bottom of this. If you have a VPC, like if your VPC 1 has the following CIDR block, let's say 10.0.0.0, so 16. One that doesn't overlap would be 1.172, 31.0.0. Oops, that's not a dot. /16. Okay. The most important part are these first four digits because there are a handful. So there's 192.0.0.0, 16. And these make the three primary IP addresses of RFC 1918. Okay, so peering is not allowed between VPCs with overlapping CIDRs. Remember this. So if it's going to be 10, it can go to, it can peer with this or this. Okay. But it cannot do that with a 10 dot. Okay. So the 172 can peer with a 10 dot. This is going to make sense once I see it. Or a 192 dot. Okay. And 192 dot can peer with a 10 dot or a 172 dot. So this gives you a good idea of what to look for in that first several digits. Okay. So that's who they can peer with, but they cannot peer with like a 10. This 10 dot could not pair with another 10 dot. 172 dot could not peer with 172 dot. That's just basic networking control. All right. Okay. So there's another step you can do with this. You can have two VPCs and launch EC2 instances in each VPC. It's optional for testing, right? So you could have a demo VPC and a default VPC and assign security groups. Let me go back and see if I can try and do this. This will be fun. Group. Okay, let's see. Security group. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to create two peer 1, and then I'm going to create VPC peer 2. Okay. 2. So VPC tier 1, I'm going to have that on my default. Okay, so inbound rules, I'm going to see about, so that has all. Wow, that's all traffic? All outbound, no wonder. I wasn't even thinking. So SSH for 22. I'll let that go for open. Yeah, and then I'll add HTTP. And then it's port 80. I'll have that for all. I know that's not restrictive enough. Okay, VPC peer 2. I'll have this on the new one I created. So SSH 22. I'll just have all HTTP. Okay, we'll have this all. Okay, this might make sense about why. Security. Oh, really? It's required? That's interesting. Okay, so we'll go. Okay, we're gonna get some security groups, but I need to check something because I think I made a mistake previously. Let me see if the inbound, did I set this up correctly? So this inbound is set up, yeah, with all this stuff. Okay, all right, that was just a thought that I had. Okay, so if I wanted to complete this, I could create the EC2s for testing purposes, but I don't necessarily want to do that. But I want to show you just what you can do. So let's go peering. Okay, let's go peering. Create a peering connection. Let's call it demo peering 1. The requester VPC, let's do that default. Just a 173 block. Okay. And then the acceptor, we'll select this as this. These, remember, 172 block, 110 dot. This should work. All right. And then from your own account and region, you could choose this from the dropdowns, which I just showed you. With a cross account, if this was outside of this account, you'd have to manually enter this in. So this is where you have to have good communication via your Slack, your Teams, even a phone call. Okay. And then you create the peering connection. And then has been requested, accept request. Okay. So this has been established. So at this point, you see the added. Let's see the peering connection. This is active. So it shows the default and the demo one I created. And then you could do some route tables, right? So you could go from here to route tables. So you could look at each of these, the default, or you could do a way to locate each one's route table. So let's see, let's go for this one. So you would update this by going to routes, edit routes, and then you can add a route. And let's see the target, peering connection. Okay, save changes. There we go. There we go. Right here. This has to be specified. What? Let's just do that. Okay, so there you go. So now you have updated route table. So the target ID goes to the peering connection ID for the route tables. You'd have to do that from the other side as well. All right. Well, what I'm going to do is break this connection because this is going to be a pain if I don't do this. Okay, let's delete this. Peering connection cannot be deleted. Choose whether or not to delete. Delete route tables. Yeah, let's delete that. Okay, so that's going to go away. Okay. And then edit routes. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to remove that. All changes have been reverted. What? Let's cancel that. Let's see what they got here. Routes. Edit routes. Huh. Well, why isn't this working right? This is going to be interesting. I'll come back to this. So from this, you can be able to SSH into an instance. You can curl or ping the private IPs of the instance, and you can ensure that traffic is accepted by the security groups, right? So it gives you a good way to go between VPCs within an account if you had applications that needed to communicate in different ways, or cross account. And that would be a different way where you enter a lot more manually. Okay. Let's get this. This is deleted. That'll go away, hopefully. Okay, and then you have to remember some security features, right? The private traffic. The traffic between peered VPCs does not traverse the public internet. There's no transitive peering. So you must explicitly peer each VPC pair. So if you had VPC A with VPC B and VPC B with VPC C, then A and C are not implied or not peered. You have to directly peer A to C. And then at that point, you have to talk about the security group referencing. So intra-region and cross-account security group referencing is necessary depending on what you're trying to do. But security groups are your gates, your initial gates to everything. And then you have to go for IAM policies depending on how you want to use this. So if you need an application to do this in a more automated fashion, then you would create role-based policies, and those roles would be able to do this and act on the resources as needed. So this would create peering requests across accounts and allow for access limited to the scope of those roles. Be aware of some issues for the exam like CIDR blocks, talking about what would allow or disallow. That's why I went over that 192, 10, 172, and 10. Um, talk about the transitive routing, and then you cannot use a peered VPC's NAT gateway, internet gateway, VPN, or direct connect. So if it's peered, you cannot do that. Okay, so let's go forward to the next one. Would be the VPC DNS settings and private zones. Okay, private hosted zones.